got some rosters here. We got some all right. Yeah. Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for youth sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics, live from Warrior Field, University of Waterloo, setting up the Youth West Bowl. We're going to talk about the tremendous rosters of athletes that we have here, the class of 2026, the hopeful draft class of 2026, some of the historical news and notes, and everything like that. Of course, Tom, how that can do, my friend?
Oh, I'm always doing well, especially when we go right on time at 11 o'clock, exactly like we talked about. So I appreciate you folks for waiting for us and for tuning in here. This is an incredible day. It's an incredible week. This is, to me, one of the best weeks of football, period, because across the country, this is purely to people who are excited about the game and want to get back to the game and are looking towards the future with all of the incredible athletes who are here behind us as well. So I cannot be happier that we've done it now 2 years in a row.
And there you go. And you set it up tremendously. Not only is it about the game, but it's about the week that preceded it. And you mentioned about last week as well, when you were here live and direct, of course, with our friends from Royal Media, helping us cover all of this as best we can. What's the week been like? How does it compare with what you saw last year? Obviously, again, and we'll shout out Waterloo many times on the show, not just for what they're doing today, but for hosting, but some of the athletes they have here. What's the week been like leading up to this pinnacle of the game?
It's been incredible to really see this. I mean, you go through anybody who's coached football before, you go through a drill, you go through whatever else. And you've got guys who didn't get in, some other guys who are, struggling for it. Maybe they're new into football. Imagine doing a drill for the first time and everybody gets off the hop. But these are some of the best players across the country here. As you can see, Team East, who are just heading out here, they'll show up on the screen in a little bit, led by head coach Sheriff Nichols, who is the head coach of Bishop Gators. It's been an incredible week from that standpoint. I mean, you get a good chance to see the best of the best doing their thing and learning from coaches that they're not necessarily used to. So it's not even necessarily like these are drills that they've done before. It's just their athletic capabilities and everything that they've been doing previously is so on point that they're able to pick things up at the get-go and really be the best versions of themselves.
And I think a huge piece of that is, as we mentioned, that the idea behind this game is that it is the hopeful draft class of the year to follow. And like, we'll go through these players, as Paul mentioned, you're seeing Team East come on the field behind us. But when you just look at some of the participants from last year, it kind of set the stage, because we're now a few weeks off of the most recent CFL draft. You think about some of the names that were in attendance here, and guys like, whether you're thinking about Eric Cumberbatch, whether it is Daniel Hosevar, Ethan Pyle, Devin Versa going number 2 overall, Riley McLeod, Jackson Finley, Lucas Stoikos, of course, Taylor Elgers. The list goes on and on of guys that were here a year ago who, with you covering it, and that are now in their training camps and mini camps as CFL players. It's a huge jump there, and I think the piece you talked about is so huge, where you're working with different coaches, and in fact, showcase not just of your skill on the field in terms of raw athleticism, raw ability, they do the testing, and I want to get your thoughts on that, because you messaged me some really interesting numbers from some players that we might not have expected them from. But that idea that, again, this is the audition before the bigger audition that will be here. Well, actually, I don't know if it's here, but in a year from now, prepping for the CFL draft. But the combine as well is huge. That we saw this week. What were some of the standout aspects from that game?
Yeah, I think with the combine here, it's very interesting because guys are obviously wanting to have solid numbers, have whatever else. And to me, in my opinion, this is your baseline. When you do this event, when you do the West Bowl, you might get, 20 reps on the bench or run a 5-2 or a 4-6 or whatever it is. But the big piece and what people don't often understand is that at the CFL combines, everybody gets a sheet and a form on all of the participants who are there. And on that form is, here's your East-West numbers. And they'll showcase the numbers here, the numbers there. And I think there's a few key categories like the bench is the easiest one to say, okay, you were at 15. Did you stay at 15? Did you grow to 20? How have you improved your numbers here and really showcasing that standpoint? I think when you have guys in this setting, you really get a chance to see the best of the best. Because this is, you've got CFL coaches who are around you who are evaluating you. You've got other people, other of your peers who are here. And so that can be a lot of pressure. And then to have a guy like your boy, my boy, Mitchell Stretchinger.
Everybody's boy.
Offensive lineman from the University of Guelph. And he puts up 26 on the bench, his personal best. And when you see guys in that setting who come to the events here and they know this is the best, this is the pinnacle of how this is going, and I'm going to give my best efforts. That's really, to me, what sticks out in my mind as guys who are operating at the highest level. And my number one favorite stat that I have to give up before I let you talk, 22 reps on the bench by a certain quarterback, Jerome Rancourt. So I think that he's beating out a lot of offensive and defensive lines with those numbers.
Trust me, we're going to talk about Jerome Rancourt very shortly here. You know, it looks like the guy's not a quarterback. He's a fullback, and you see him when he runs the short yardage for Western. It proves that to be the case. But I was talking with Leomio Talayo beforehand. If you don't know his name, I mean, you're clearly not following our content. The star receiver, especially for the Laurier Gold Talk. At that point, you were mentioning about how they have the numbers when they go into the CFL Combine, the Invitational, and the National. And they get that comparison, and there's so much that goes into it. But at the end of the day, just sometimes we make TV decisions when we don't look for the full story. And I was asking him about that fact of, like, do any of the guys maybe talk about maybe when you're out for stress testing, just keep it a little bit in the tank so you know that assuming you don't get hurt if something happens when you're at the national, your numbers should go up. And your numbers should go up anyway. These guys are training year round. They are well-oiled machines. They're taking all the steps. You're mentioning how there was some conversation about that, but in talking with his guy, your guy, Mike Daly, best teams coordinator for Laurier, he's like, yeah, but you're a football player, you're an athlete. No one wants to see that kind of like lack of competition in someone who would possibly dog their numbers one year and move going a little higher in the next. So again, these guys out here, the best of the week, they're out here because of the and give it their all in every given opportunity, being no less. But you know, you brought up Jerome Rancourt along with some of those other guys, and Jerome Rancourt is an interesting example where he's going to be on Team West at quarterback along with Alex Bridges. Pardon me, my apologies. With Alex Bridges coming out of Golden Gale. We'll start talking about some of these players, and we'll start with Alex Bridges. And an interesting story for him where, you know, he's sort of the prodigal son, the chosen one out of the Kingston area, signed with Queens, gets his first start, or one of his first starts, in lieu of an injury to his predecessor to play in that Gates Cup game, I think it was in 2022. And then we're thinking, hey, you know what? They may have lost. It was the second of the two consecutive Gates Cup. They lost to Western. But it's like the writing on the wall, getting a young quarterback from the area, by all measures, has the look, the body, all the skills and standards to be that next guy. That's a nice start from the to get. But then the career, it started a little bit, a lot due to injury.
Yep.
What have you seen from Breaking so far this week? Because obviously, again, you don't want to hold him to the guy. It's unfortunate, doesn't it? I don't put truly the best of his game consistently period of time after started, which means what is Breaking?
So what I will say, we've got some outstanding quarterbacks right here. Folks who don't know, Alex Freakin out of Queens, you've got Jerome Rancourt out of Western, you've got Nick Orr out of Waterloo here, who's actually doing really well, and Anton Amenrud, star quarterback out of the University of Saskatchewan. Those are four outstanding quarterbacks. To me, by far, the most impressive has been Alex Freakin. I think his capabilities to get the ball out, his pocket presence, the way that he moves defenses has really just been incredible. Everything that I've seen from this young man, I just feel so sorry for Gale's fans because you haven't seen him all that much because he's been injured so many times. But when he's at his best, he's playing the way that he can play. He is as impressive a quarterback as I think we've seen. Maybe not necessarily to Taylor Elgin level yet, but he's got the size, he's got the frame. I think he has the confidence that a really outstanding quarterback here. The real big question is, can he stay healthy and play an entire league or the entire season?
Yeah, and you know, going back to that game in 23, the miraculous, Hail Mary at the end of the game in Richmond Stadium for Western to pull off a last-minute victory over Queens. Don't have the numbers in front of me, but when you go to that game, we always think of this current iteration as a run-heavy team. It's been a very run-heavy team. But Greek is throwing the ball like 40-plus times against incredible Western defense, to say the least. So obviously the team trusts him. He's got great chemistry with one of those guys. Just that unfortunate piece of just the injury bug having been in so far in his career. You mentioned the other quarterbacks, and one thing I wanted to throw your way, because we talked about Jerome Rancourt, and like again, we've seen the times when he's got to fill in, and sometimes at the biggest moments, including in the playoff run in 2023 for Western on their way to their third Gates Cup win when Evan went down with injury. But he's a back forward. And he's talented. He's big. He's strong. That's the numbers on the bench. He is powering and talking with Naomi as well. We're going to see Rancourt on specials today, which, again, if that seems a little mysterious to you as far as what a quarterback would seriously remember, again, this is what he's perhaps doing and best preparing himself as a CFL talent. But then you mentioned as well, Amanu being out of Can West, but Nick Wolf is out of OUA. I'm curious, does it strike you a bit odd last year? We saw a bit more diversity of AU West, Can West, RSU, OUA across the board. Now not only have 3 of the 4 quarterbacks in play, but you wonder, are there some quarterbacks out east? And out west and in Quebec being like, wait, sorry, I didn't want that's one of the quarterbacks in this game. I know it's obviously specific to them being a third-year player being drafted out for this upcoming season. But that did strike me as a bit odd. Not to take away from what Jerome Rancourt can do, what he's done, and what he's capable of. But I found that a bit odd seeing the lot.
Absolutely. And from everybody that I've spoken to, I spoke to, Greg Marshall and a number of other coaches that are here. It seems just there's really strong players in a lot of the other areas, but quarterbacks is one of them. And it's not that we don't have outstanding quarterbacks across the country here. It's just that there's a number of them that are probably that are either in their 4th or 5th year in our draft eligible as of this year, or are in their second years and are not really in that spot where you need to start looking at them for the CFL draft because, as you and I both know, the difference between any player, especially a quarterback from first year to third year, is massive. When you get those extra reps and you're able to read everything a little bit better. So getting a young guy here when he's not ready is almost a detriment to him because you might set him up as, he can't really read his stance all that well. He's not really doing this all that well. And then you start to say, like, hey, I don't know what you guys think a second-year quarterback should be capable of doing here, pairing him directly to a third-year guy. So from that standpoint, I think it's a little bit strange, and I think there's no spot that's more apparent than quarterback. You do still see a plentiful array of selection across everywhere else.
And there's a ton of great offensive weapons that we'll get into. But sticking with Team East, I do want to go back to some of those offensive weapons. But you had the perfect in that maybe it's not the strongest quarterback class. I don't want to take away from anyone here. It's, again, compared to the class we saw the last few years. It was so strong with the linebacker, especially for this Team East. And I think it's so much of that when you get to talking about how our football is so defense heavy. I mean, think about names like Loic Gagne coming out of Concordia, Jackson Bashir out of Ottawa, obviously out of Olympian, a super strong linebacker play. Christian Grant out of Carleton, we've been so big on your boy in Justin Pace, and then of course Nicholas Rock out of Montreal, obviously that man, also the boot, familiar with the big stage, and others as well. The linebacker play is certainly, I think, where a lot of eyes are on, not just for both these teams, picking up some of the on this side of things. It's going to be a physical affair weekend.
It's going to be one of the most impressive showcases, really. I mean, you and I were talking about it, and when you just first start looking at some of these names, you're going, wow, this Team West really stacked. You look at some of the running backs there. They've got the boys from 12.
We're going to talk.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that, but we've got some huge old linemen there. Like, we're going, oh my God, this was really good. And then on that Wednesday practice, that's one of probably the most well known about practices when it comes to that West, because that's the combined practice. That's when you start seeing inside run with Team East and Team West. That's when you start seeing Skelly and everything else from that standpoint. And then we see, and I'm watching, of course, I ain't watching Skelly, I'm watching inside run. And Team West going up against Team East defense, and those boys stayed in, and they were tough as all hell. I mean, you get a guy like a Justin Pace, and when you can see, you can talk to this man, especially when you watch him, I think he gets pretty clear why we are so high on him. His run read capabilities, the way he comes downhill, he is not afraid to take on a 300 plus pound lineman, bench press him off and go make taps here. That inside run period was pretty much a stalemate across the board. It was incredible to see.
Yeah, and again, I think that's where really a lot of the eyes are going to be. So it's for the purpose of sort of mirroring that conversation. Let's look at the run game on Team West. Mentioned the boys out of my Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins. We got Donovan Malloy. We got Isaiah Smith. You talked about having been in a couple of their scrimmages and some of their spring camp practices. really looking like that extra year now. Having played last year, not looking like he's at his full self that we saw in his first year. He's looking like he's back. You added to the mix Liam Talbot, a real kind of gadget player out of Windsor, Malcolm Alonga out of York, and then the hometown kid of Evan Basiliga at that H-back fullback, and Sebastian Parsons also at fullback coming out of, again, such the hometown kid in down at Laurier. Yeah. Save the O-line talk, because that's, again, this is a running back room. That is tremendous. There's a lot of size in that running back room going up against those tremendous linebackers, or just getting to the line and playing hard looking two line on they'll be having to revolve and beat their way through. But as a running back room, to me, that was the thing that jumped off the page more than anything when I looked at the division this season and I said, hey, you know, we were here at Red Black last week and they get the two players, then they do it like a draft. Maybe we need to do it like that. I don't think it's quite as slanted as maybe I first thought on looking at this, but that running back room is certainly something to look at.
Yes, unbelievable talent in that running back room. Starting off with the fullback, we've had a couple of conversations about him here. One of probably my favorite line, my favorite quote from a coach talking about a player that I've heard in a very long time. Coach Todd Galloway, offensive coordinator for the Laurier Golden Hawks, talking to me about Sebastian Martinez, and he goes, he's an unbelievable fullback because he has this mentality of, you know what would be really great about the A gap is if it was four gaps big. And he takes a deep tackle and will drive them off the sidelines. And only being, you know, a smaller guy himself, but he comes with bad intentions, as Tim McCallum would love to say. And he just has great football acumen in this setting here. So having that guy first and foremost starting and opening up the gaps for one of the best running back cores that you could possibly think of here is really an outstanding look. I mean, when you look at, you know, you're trying to think about the coverage of this. I think Isaiah Smith, especially at his time, almost being something of a fullback type at Guelph, especially last year when he's trying to get his legs back underneath him. Now suddenly that's translating into him being, you know what, I can be a power back. I can put my head down and run forward and get those 3-4 extra yards there. And then you've got Donovan Malloy and Liam Talbot who can make a guy miss in the hole, and God forbid you give those guys space because they are gone. And with that, it is an incredibly well-rounded group in this setting here, along with a guy like Seb, who is ready and willing to hit anything that moves in order to create a gap for his running back.
And we've got to talk about the guys that front blocking. Before we go there, another thing that stood out to me that I was so excited to see as part of the rosters, mentioned Coach Galloway, and we talk about here ad nauseum, tremendous job he's doing with the Goldhawks. But most of the offense, 14 West, only Mason Nye, but got me so fired up. Former Saskatchewan Husky quarterback, pivot of, I guess, only about 2 years ago, was in that outstanding Stanley Cup in London, Ontario, where they fell to Laval, but a tremendous back and forth offensive affair. When you think about the type of offense that he was doing, or a part of, I should say, with the Huskies out of Sask, we often talk about the fact that Chan West is a little more of that pro style pass first offense. Obviously, got a guy like Nice who's gonna run your strengths. And then thinking about those back, and talk about those receiving weapons have, and of course everyone else part of that. When you think about Mason Nice as a player, having seen him with the Huskies, how effective they were as an air raid offense, Daniel Reeves and the likes of some of those other guys, off the Greg Frank, tremendous running back they had there as well, or they had with them. What are you expecting from his mentality? No doubt he's going to try and match the talent that he has, as all the coaches do. But just what do you imagine from a young coach time?
Well, it's really interesting because talk about him. Obviously, you want to talk about the coach that he was with when he was at Saskatchewan, and Scott Ford, the head coach for Saskatchewan Huskies here. And it was an incredible experience because yesterday on Friday there was coaches camp, and I got a chance to sit in and be a part of all of this. Well, yes, we're doing this a part of the podcast. Really, I'm there because I love being a student of the game, listening to these guys. To start off the day, you have Greg Marshall talking about the power run game. And then at the end of the day, they do like a chalk talk session where they're talking about Scott Ford. And he starts off, he says, we are the reverse Western. We are 5 wide receivers. I do not recruit a running back unless he has hands to catch the ball. And we're going to air it out no matter what happens here. And you see a guy like Mason Nias who's able to make those reads at the next level. And that's why Saskatchewan is really showcasing so much prowess there. And that's why when you have an outstanding gunslinger like Manson Anderoon, who has probably a few too many interceptions when you start looking at that line, it's because of that offense that he's in. And when I'm talking to Mason, he's talking about, the best way you can do this is try to simplify this as best you can. You talk about divide the field, you talk about just looking at a two-man side, whatever the case may be. I think if this is anything like the Saskatchewan offense, which I think it will be, they're going to go after Team East here, and they're going to air the ball out pretty good. And with the quarterbacks that they have, I think they're going to do a pretty damn good job of doing that too.
And especially with one coming out of that system, as we already set up. And that probably sets us up to talk about a couple of those options for Team West there. And again, to your point about the sets, we'll look at them that are coming out of Can West. You're going up against that's like what the China ran, like what Calgary China had. Again, which number of attempts and also it's some of those ball hawks out there. In terms of the receiving offense, we already talked about Leon Oshpalayo, who's been have a large impact. I suspect to be prepared here. That's where it's been making the mark early in his career with Laurier, playing behind guys like George, Ray Thorne, and just a joke of something I think we'll talk about a lot going into next year. How exciting it's going to be. Seems really step to the spotlight and see how he can shine in that role there. But joining him again from the OUA ranks, thinking about guys like Colby Ginn out of Windsor, Jared Tessier out of Guelph, and a whole host of guys, with no surprise, coming out of the Can West. Everett Reed, again, another OUA guy out of Matt. A lot of these receiving options, and I know you have in front of you there, coming out of Can West, perhaps again, match that styles make fights that we talk about, how Can West likes to air it out a little bit more, the way you talked about it so personally with Bass. Who are some of these options you're saying OUA and outside across the sport that these quarterbacks are going to be looking at?
Well, listen, we've already talked about them, and I know you like to try to spread things out, but you cannot overstate the impressive nature that Naomi Oshikoya had. I mean, in a skeleton during the Wednesday practice, if there's 30 reps, Naomi's getting targeted at least 16, getting targeted way more than any other receiver that's there. He's catching balls, and he's a big target. He's got a good cap radius. And even talking to a lot of his other coaches at Laurier, start thinking, this is a stud athlete and everything. They go, his catches, his hands were not good when he first came in. He had worked his tail off to get back into being who should be a number one receiver in this game, which is an unbelievable accomplishment to be able to say. But to move off of him, I think one of the big things that kind of separates the OUA receivers from a few others, not to say that it doesn't happen across others, but here I saw a lot of contested catches. Like, you've got a guy draped over top of you, and even despite that, coming through the ball. I think Aiden Nemeth did a fantastic job of that, even in practice. There's a great picture of it. Well, he's got his hands here, and there's a defender with hands on, and he still is able to bring that ball in, and especially in an air raid offense. While obviously you're always dealing with defense backs, it's much more you're trying to spread them out, you're trying to get them away versus grabbing something over the middle, putting your head down, and really securing that. So those are two guys that have really stuck out to me. I really like this kid, Carter Kettle, out of University of Alberta as well. He's a big, tall receiver. He's got length, and he's got a really solid pathway with him, especially coming out of the Can West, talking about the conference plays, how they're different in that setting. When you have a quarterback like Anderson, who's throwing it out to another Can West receiver, there's just an automatic chemistry that's there, and that's starting to build on that side as well. So, unbelievable receivers from top to bottom, but those are a few of the guys that stuck out.
As we already said, just with the nature of not just quarterback plays, but Coach Nye is calling it up, and what we saw from him as a player with Sass, no doubt they're going to be trying to get at some of those guys, despite that running back room. Let's go back to that running back room, though, Tom. Well, more specifically, the run game before we go back to talk about East again, because we got to talk about the big dogs up front. We got to talk about them. Well represented here as well, but some of the schools that we have on this roster are here. Take us through the guys that we're going to be seeing that pocket for Anton and more.
Well, first and foremost, guy that we've already mentioned, but Mitchell Stretching, he's an unbelievable talent from this standpoint because he could play guard, he could play center at a very high level. Really great technique. And honestly, you expect that out of the University of Guelph, and you have an unbelievable all-black coach like Mike McDonald. But but you have that capabilities there, so he is really impressive. He's certainly a guy to look for. Another guy that I really like, not just because he's from my alma mater, but Breckenhill is a load of a human being. He's got decent enough technique, maybe not quite as solid as Mitchell's, but when he gets hands on, you ain't going anywhere. And that's an unbelievable asset to have as an offensive lineman. He's got big, tall, offensive tackles here as well. one of them out of, I believe, the University of Saskatchewan, Jack Warwick. Listed at 6'4", 306. I think this is a little taller to think, if I'm being honest with you. But really outstanding length and ability to move bodies and really to handle speed rushes there. Because just with a few kick steps and with those long arms, you can keep a guy at bay pretty easily. So a lot of really great things that I've seen from the Team West offensive line, and I think that's really going to help them in the long run when they're trying to run the ball as effectively as they want to.
We talk about this a lot when we look at the various teams evaluating across sports when it comes to offensive lines, where unlike some of the other positions, and you've made the comparison so beautifully before, that actually DB might be one of the closest parallels to O-line, not just in some of the specific techniques, but in the way they work as a group. But just to that point of working as a group, where we talked about how, in sort of the parlance of Madden, sometimes would rather give up maybe having that 95 overall player in lieu of some more 85 overall, but he's been playing together and that consistency. The nature of an event like this, where these are guys coming from all across the sport, from C to C to, well, I guess not truly C to C, but, coast to coast, having to get a week of work in, the playbook, I imagine, will be pretty vanilla concepts that all these guys have gone through, but it's not the same as receiver running a smash concept, a flood concept, where, yes, there are going to be nuances. I don't mean to take for granted the way that, when you're really connected with a quarterback and receiver that, you break it off slightly earlier or you round that out route or whatever it might be. But on the one we talk about this so often, having that connection, having that communication is so important. What have you seen out of that group? And just going back to the experience last year, that it's sort of make and break where the O-line is at best and sometimes where they falter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big pieces here is, of course, like you said, it's really difficult to get that chemistry right off the hop. When you've got guys who've been playing together for years at the university, and you're expected to come together within a week. But I think the big piece that brings these guys together, and you can see from top to bottom, is that idea of competition. These guys respect each other because they are some of the people who are at the top of their game and are really putting the work and really do everything that they can in order to make this as best as humanly possible here. And so when you've got an offensive line group that hasn't really played all that long together, but knows, hey, I saw you do a one-on-one, and I saw you pancake one of the best defensive linemen that's out there, or I saw you give everything you could to see an outside zone, or whatever the case may be. You gain that respect pretty quick, and you start to build up that way. You're also entering into this saying, I want all of us to succeed. I want all of us to do well. So in order for the running back to probably get his, I need to make sure that I get mine, and I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to show the quarterback gets this, show gets the receivers, and all of that stuff. And so I think one of the things that's the most beautiful about this is the idea of everybody working together to promote everybody else. And that shared experience of we want to showcase the best that we can so that hopefully in a year's time we're getting our names called at that draft level. That builds into a shared experience, a shared goal. And that's a big thing when you're on a university team. You're obviously, we're working to win a Vanier Cup. We're working to win a Yates Cup, Hardy Cup, Boney Bowl, a Dunsmore Cup. Now we're working so that we can see each other in the next level. We're working for great cups here. And I think that immediately just makes sure that everybody's on the same page and they're building that kind of
And being on the same page with the associate, and I think we've now before, you have five offensive linemen, but one offensive line, and not this is always going to win out over the pond, and they're going to be battling it out with some talented defensive line. You mentioned spending a lot of time working and observing those inside run periods. We have a couple OUA guys, like Burke coming out of Carleton, as well Park Williams coming out of UFC, a host of other guys coming out of AUS, coming out of RCQ, as mentioned. That's a terrific linebacker for that we went through that, but of course, nothing makes a linebacker's life easier than when they have guys up front eating up double teams, clogging up those gaps, letting them run free. So who are some of those guys that good? But when we look at inside run through the line side of things, get a time today.
So there's a few guys that have really stuck out to me. One guy in particular that I love seeing, I want to make sure I get his name right. Sorry, I thought I had him. I don't have him anymore. Essentially, he's a defensive lineman out of Manitoba here. And my apologies, folks. Just give me 1 second. Actually, you know what? Let's
Was
save
he
it
on
for
Team
another.
West if he was
He
Manitoba?
was on
Okay,
Team
yeah,
West.
yeah.
My
We'll come back to those big boys, man. Don't worry.
we'll come back to that. My
Shout out to the
apologies.
five. Shout out to David on Yamada.
um, One of the guys that really stuck out to me was Parker Williams, defensive lineman out of USC. I really like his ability in the run game in particular, taking on double teams, setting tackles in particular. And I thought that he did a fantastic job from that standpoint. Josh Dunham, defensive lineman out of Cleveland, who I think has the capabilities at the next level, or at the bare minimum has showcased himself really well here. I think there's a number of guys here, and it's difficult with those interior D linemen because they're very much similar to the offensive linemen. If they're really doing their job right, you don't hear from them all that much because they're taking on double teams and they're allowing linebackers to go behind them. But I thought that those two guys in particular, really impressed me from the side of things that they're headed.
Well, and we talked already about those linebackers, including Christopher Tufan, and then talking about those D linemen and knowing that Carlton is having Brody Burke on that D line as well. You look at the numbers that Tufan racks up for Carlton, that doesn't happen if he doesn't have good D line play in front of him. Now, of course, one of the D line that's in front of him for his career at Carlton, you don't get that, right? So, of course, when you have a CFL player on your D line, that's going to be super helpful there as well. He's been talking with a lot of the scouts around here, and is over to getting familiar with a lot who are evaluating, getting to know the particulars. You mentioned how two lines can be a little tricky because it doesn't always show up on the stage. We always look at who those big pass rushers are. Thinking of a guy from a couple of years past when Izzy Western would have been. But what are some of the things that you're hearing from the evaluators at the next level when they're talking about those two linemen, knowing that the folks in the stands, they might not see it, but the people who are here with a fine-tooth comb, they're picking up on all these little nuances.
I think the big piece here is just your capabilities and how well do you adapt to a new system, new style, new guy that you're going up against with. And I think talking with a guy like Tom Blackstone, CFL scout for the Tiger Cats in particular, you start looking at, okay, talk to me seriously about some of these quarterbacks. Like, do they have the capabilities? Are they legit? He is the quarterback coach, I believe for Team West, and he's saying, Anthony Anderson is one of those guys who I think has real potential. I think he could have the abilities to get to the next level. And I think Alex Brees is in that same spot. You've got the arm talent, got the growth, got the size. It's now just, can you put it all together? What does your lead look like? How are you able to really transform this and get into that next level where you're throwing to guys in the CFL up against 2000? So quarterback standpoint, absolutely. One of the most difficult positions to really try to garner for is that Canadian running back. So few and far between with how the CFL is set up and certainly how the Americans who are coming up in that league. They've got a big advantage that way, but I really like the work that we've seen from a lot of these guys just coming up here so far. And I think that they're showcasing a good ability like an Isaiah Smith, like a Dante Malloy, and that's West in particular, and showcasing what they're able to do and what they're able to bring to the next level here. And then on top of that, obviously, the one thing that you're always going to be consistent at CFO, Canadian linemen, those Canadian big boys. And I think they've done a hell of a job showcasing their stuff here as well. So from that standpoint, I think they're really impressed with the size with some of the big boys. And then going into the defense, like I said, all eyes are on this linebacker core. They've got the strength, the speed, and the capabilities to come downhill to make a tackle against one of the best, running backs we can see across the league here and take on doubles. So that's been some of the pieces that I've been told from some of these guys.
And you mentioned with the running backs in particular, the importance of size, speed. We were talking with some of the scouts earlier on about how that block is so important. And it just makes me harken back to one of those many reasons that our game is that spirit game and tying in well just with the nature of the combine is that you scream it to the high heavens every year when we come to combine seasons. We get live reps. You see running backs stepping up and taking on a linebacker, running out of full speed from depth. We were talking to some scouts. That's one of the biggest make or break. You can't take on a linebacker coming at you with got a $100,000, couple $100,000 worth quarterback stand behind you there, then it's going to be making curtains for you. So again, another reason why the kind of right back that blocking is so key. And you mentioned some of those big boys that are coming out of the Guelph side of things are perhaps going to get those good opportunities. You mentioned Andrews then again, just as Tom gets attacked by a lake bug there.
Yeah,
Got a lot of
hell.
time. You're still on right there, buddy.
Nope, thank you. Appreciate that.
I think that's supposed to be good luck. Maybe they're poisonous. I don't know. We'll find out shortly. Stay tuned. You mentioned Andrews again there. We talked about the Can West style of football, Josh in particular, having a guy in Coach Nye coaching him up, the weapons he has on offense. Let's talk about some of these defenses. Talk so formidably about that linebacker for a couple of those big boys in the middle that are going to be trying to slow down for the Nicholas Squad and the assistant fans and the like, boy Jeff to be able to clean up those runs. But we think about a couple guys we're really familiar with and more of our folks in the enterprise familiar with the Schneid, Terry Phillips coming out of Carlton, the likes of Patrick Cumberbatch, of course, from that name, you go together like peanut butter and jelly. As far as some of the OUA content that's going to be patrolling the secondary there, getting a lot of these RC2 guys in here, names that we've been calling out as we get into those East-Sport playoffs, Cherry's coming up, being one that really sticks out to being the guy who we've been talking about quite a bit coming out of Bishops, and obviously that was a terrific that they had. Who are some of the DBs that are really looking to shine today from that?
I think one of the guys that really impressed me is defensive back out of Montreal, Gaultier. I apologize if I butchered that, but I'm really trying my best here. I'm trying to get as Canadian as I possibly can. But he had done an outstanding job, and that when you start talking about great defense, if you're looking across the country, RSC2 has got to be where that is. Speaking Montreal in particular, over the past couple of years, with their outstanding game against Laval and getting into the Vanier Cups, that's the way that they've done that. So it's no surprise to me that he really showcased stuff. Of course, there's a reason why we talk about the name of Cumberbatch so damn much. Patrick Cumberbatch is truly on this of great defensive back play going this year as well. The one guy that I wasn't necessarily expecting, really like the kid Alex McDonald, defensive back out of Bishops. I like his speed. I like his size. I like the way that he's able to run with a lot of these this year. Those are two guys that I just, once again, I'm spending all my time down in inside run. I'm not really worried about all the skelly periods, but still, even despite all of that, those guys really impressed me with how they're able to play.
And they're going to be putting on the field by their coaches and obviously talking about the linebackers and just kind of going down. I couldn't help but bring up the name of former guy don't get there. Coach of those linebackers doing his work out of U of A with the Golden Bears. We'll talk a little bit about the coaching staff on West a little bit. Who are some of the names? And again, these names that we're getting old here, brother. Not only guys we play with, but it's now starting to become guys that we talk about in our role here covering the league. But let's stick with these two for a little bit. We talked about the headman coming out of the Bishop Senior program. Obviously, that's terrific here. And falling short of glory in that national semifinal. Some of these coaches on this staff perhaps a bit unfamiliar to our more OUA focused fans out there. Who are some of the names calling out shot?
Well, first and foremost, I had a chance to sit down and speak with Jean Gab, and when you go up against a guy like that, in practice, especially games, obviously you're getting him at his most competitive, at his most intense. And so there'd be times where I remember I'm going up against him. He's putting the helmet down, getting underneath my chin, trying to blow me back up. And obviously, great linebackers are a constant thing at the University of Western Ontario or Western University, as it now said. But getting a chance to speak to him, the nicest dude you've ever seen, the nicest guy, like just so happy, huge smile on his face, big handshake and everything.
You hate to see it, man.
You hate to see it. Something about those Western defenders who actually just be outstanding human beings just drive you nuts.
Want to hate him so much. You just can't.
But he was great, especially in the coach's clinic. He went through some linebacker drills, confidently speaking, and really impressed me from that standpoint. And I think they've got a fantastic defensive coordinator at the University of Alberta. So well done, Coach Bones, doing that. A few of the other guys who are here, Matt Holliday, special teams assistant out of Carlton. I really like the way that he's integrated a lot of stuff side of things. Obviously, you get a guy like Corey Grant coaching up his seniors. One of the best ever to do it at Laurier in the CFL, and then now you have a chance to go one-on-one with them in the practice. Yeah, soak up everything you possibly can there, folks. Even Angus O'Mara, off the line coach out of Carlton as well. I really loved this idea, coach's clinic in particular here. you see, these are for any other coach in the area or whoever wants to try to get better. In every one of these sessions, you have these core coaches who are in. Angus is in there with me, and he's listening to all these guys talk, listening to Greg Marshall on how to like the power run game, and asking questions and really trying to get as better as he can. That's a fantastic thing to really be able to see. So the two of them, those guys are just two guys that are really effective.
I love that you brought up Coach Grant. I want to talk about something had here as they make their way off the field. We're about 22 minutes away from kickoff in the 2025 East West Bowl. Again, here at the University of Waterloo at Warrior Field. Aren't here yet, make your way down, get yourself a ticket. It's a beautiful day. We're here right next to the Pier 10. See in the backdrop, possibly in the backdrop, the stand's starting to fill up. It's the place to be if you aren't tuned in live for the stream. But if you are tuned in on stream, give us to our guy and Adam McGuire call the game. One of the best in the business to do it. But I love that you brought up Coach Grant there in the coaching staff of 4 teams with the receivers. Yeah, when you can have someone of his immaculate talent as both a player and a coach, and we obviously think back to that 29 Yates Cup championship, the Marauders, and what him and Coach Gallagher were able to do with that air raid offense that they had, obviously at the time at Carlton, that's really been the emphasis there. And some of the players he's going to be working with, again, coming a lot out of RC2, a lot coming out of West of people that folks might not be as familiar with. But another name I want to start with, we talked about, and I just saw him walk behind us. You probably saw him go there, Coach Rand over there. When we talked about, so we got our boys coming out here. I love to see them. Get moments it's terrific. Well, but seeing a guy in left field here, talk about a guy from Rancourt, quarterback and do like everything and fill up the Gatorade coolers and go down on punt cover for you. A guy in Russell Weir who, is the quintessential, should just have the ATH list next position athlete, because he does it all. Those team full tails, and we talked about how with Alex Regan in his tenure there has been dealing with a lot of injury. We liked a lot of what Anthony Fields is doing in there. But Russell Weir was a guy that was also getting reps at quarterback, along with being on special, along with playing receiver. This is a guy who, again, can bring that versatility, which in a venue like this, or in an event like this, I should say more specific, is so important because those are the types of things that might make or break a guy make it to the next level or not just being a specialist, but being a jack of all trades.
Oh my goodness! When you look at a guy like Russell Wood, starts feeling like it's exactly like you said, just the athletic ability. He'll really play any position. And hey, you know what? You're down 2 quarterbacks. Hey, Russell, why don't you get in there and throw a freaking game-winning touchdown pass? The dying moments against Winger as well. So this is the guy who could really do it all, to showcase his versatility. And I think even in this kind of setting, when you have a guy that's gone from one position to another position, in that setting, I think that I raised a lot of CFL scouts in that capability because you're not just a one-trick pony. You're not just one guy who all I do is this position and I can only play anything else. That versatility to be able to be placed anywhere will help you astronomically get on the field faster, especially in the special team set, which Russell Weir has showcased his capability at that point as well.
And sticking from the OUA perspective, because hey, we're biased if not, and uh, you know, talking about Russell Weir, talking about Coach and with for example, receivers, as one of these receivers, Frederick Hatchie, going back 2 years ago to Ferdinand's first All Canadian award. We kind of nicknamed her, I'll take more of the brunt of it because maybe they don't like it. It was really the Kasim Ferdinand and friends show.
Yeah.
But then we see last year, even Wilkinson picks up another All Canadian extension of one Tristan Reddy, who was doing this thing with the combine for the CFL draft last year. And now we see a guy like Frederick Hatchie, who, along with some of those other receivers, are now getting the opportunity. Much like we talked about with Naomi, with guys like Keith Jordan out of Laurier, Graham Thorne, possibly moving on. Frederick Hatchie, a guy who I'm really interested in this game and moving forward in this Carlton year. It seems like Tristan is ready and will still be back there. But just that jump that sometimes happens, it's not guys again, wet things. You now see how that play a little more attention on you. I'm really interested in what Hatch do in a game like today. Obviously, everyone on this team, it's literally an all-star game. There's no lack of talent. But just knowing that your team it shows you because of what he's done so far in his career, the potential that you have, really interested in what he can do on the stage. What did you see so far out of the college?
Well, I love it so much because exactly like you mentioned, especially with a guy like a Leonardo Flyer, the reason why we're so excited about that is because he's really taking that step to separate himself. When you're in these outstanding offenses, you've got a plethora of unbelievable receivers. A lot of times you have to not necessarily stay in your lane, but you've got your own routes, your own responsibilities that you have to do. Here in this setting, you're fighting to be the guy. You're fighting to be the go-to receiver for all of the quarterbacks with when that's fun. And I think Frederick Hatchie has done a fantastic job in showcasing once again, another big, tall receiver who's got the length, who's got the ability to just out jump certain dudes or to go up to get the ball. I really like how this guy has been bringing the very best that he has into the setting here and kind of just shedding off this idea of, you know what, Kasim is the guy. He is an all Canadian. He deserves every accolade. But this is my time. This is now my time to come out here and showcase why I'm so damn good and why Carlton Haskins should be a whole lot better than what it was last year.
And nonetheless, why we were talking about that was going this year, maybe we talked about it more so as possibly one of the best we're seeing in OUA and no doubt block sports of just seeing some of the coaches out to the field where it's just under for about 50, 60 minutes away from the kickoff here. I want to talk about a little, take a break from the players on the field. We talk about some of the coaches involved here. Talk about a little philosophy about the way that coaches utilize some of their players who are getting these opportunities. Because when we talk about our guy, on Stone Scalloway. Sorry, guys, if that just ruined the audio there for a second. And how this guy in all sorts of things. And then talk about a guy like Leon, how important that is for him, where coaches now see him not just in one spot. I just said that stay in your lane mentality, but can see, oh, you know what? It's one thing for a scout and a coach to look at one of these kids and say, man, they got the build, they got the speed, they got the dog, whatever it is. You imagine them playing. Imagine playing this position. Well, actually get some of these coordinators like Todd Galloway, these guys and talking with Blades, even playing the slot stage, which like he must be the biggest slot back that's ever stepped on a football field. But we've seen this going back to our tenures at Mason and well, respectively, where guy goes to East West or goes to a combine, maybe even goes to a CFL team for a couple comes back, and then Jesus them around again. Some teams are a little more stubborn in trying to acquiesce in terms of making the, not necessarily sacrificing, but having the goal match the need of those one versus saying, hey, look, if you get the shot, but we're not going to change. What are some of your thoughts, just again, from a coaching standpoint, philosophically, any things that you might have seen your time at Max, or thinking about some of the guys that we've covered, where some coaches, is right for them to get those opportunities. Other players, they sometimes switch things around. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I think that in this kind of a setting here, you're just kind of trying to showcase the very best that everybody has at any given point. And so you're not necessarily thinking of, there's aspects of time where you've got, here's a home run play, for example, that really works well off of this look. So I'm going to consistently give you this run play, and then here's a play action, and I'm going to bomb it down the sidelines. Now there's more so, we're just going to air things out. We're going to do everything that we can from a relatively basic offense, because obviously we don't have a lead here, but we're still going to do everything we can. We're going to send blitzes. We're going to do twists. We're going to do all of this stuff to showcase the capabilities that these young men have and do it in a CFL setting so that these guys can see it at what they would be like at the next level against some of the best here. So I've had this conversation with a few guys, one of them being Mason Nias, in that setting of, when you're trying to get a guy and you're trying to get him as excited as possible, trying to get a quarterback into that right mindset, you have some of those big throws and things that you really dial up for him so that he gets that, you know what? I am the guy. I am the dude here, and I can fit this ball in that 4-yard window in a corner route 40 yards down the field. He says, absolutely. We try to dial things up so that there's an automatic read and try to give him the best opportunity for that. And I really would not be surprised to see more and more of those type of plays in this setting. Here's a blitz off the edge for this outside linebacker who wants to showcase his speed and athletic ability to get around an offensive line and make a tackle. Here's a twist where a defensive tackle can get to the outside and showcase that he can still keep contained even though he's a 300-plus pound guy. So this is really where this game is going to be a fantastic showcase because it is a showcase.
And we were talking with Coach Kendall Westlake out of the Windsor Lancers program beforehand, and she was just talking about how stressful it is to set the depth chart. When again, every player is an all-star in their own right. Switching philosophically from the coaching standpoint, to look at some of the players, both work with young athletes at the high school, at OSFL level. As we know, there's going to be 24 players on the field at any given time, and only one ball. Sometimes guys feel like they have to do a little bit more. Sometimes guys take that mentality of, I'm just going to do what my coach has dialed up to the best of my ability. That's certainly where I'm going to preach what you have to do. I think it was in talk with the legendary broadcaster Jack Ford and talking about what Coach Balls preaches to the Laurier Bulldogs. You go 112. I think that's a great mentality to have. But it's understandable for these young men, recognizing what's on the table, what's at stake here in preparation for not giving up the whole age, sports teams, the next draft. They can sometimes get a little tight and feel, I've got to make this play, or maybe I've got to go above and beyond on that standpoint. What are some of the pieces of advice, knowing that that is still going to take not you're going to try and that, but trying to have them just play that.
I think in the big setting here, the thing that differentiates this from another one is that at this level, you've got the eyes that are on you are guys who know the game, who know, hey, you know what? It's an outside zone to the right, the left side of the line, especially your left receiver. Probably not going to have a significant role in this. What is he going to do in that play which could take a play off? There's eyes all across this entire game. So there is no aspect of, you're going to take a play here, you're going to do this here, or I'm going to try to do too much, because even that can be a detriment to what you're actually trying to do here. Stay in your lane, stay with your responsibilities, and do it to the very best of your capabilities, and you will be just fine.
And again, we are about 10 minutes here, 11 minutes to be specific, from the University of Waterloo for the 2025 East Western Zebras are making their way out to the field. So you know we're getting close to kickoff. There's a few more players I want to cover here before we get into the action and before we sign off to check out this, what is set to be an outstanding showcase here, as you keep mentioning. We have a running back, 14, and two young OUA guys in particular. It's Zach Nyros at UFT and Quentin Scott out of Oregon. Quentin Scott obviously missing that whole year for them on the run for the Van Yate Cup, which hopefully we had a chance with him, and maybe we did get a chance this week, because that's such an interesting thing to think of the mentality of recognizing that it must be so finish now. And then for a guy in Jack Nyros, who with that running back who at UFG was dealing with a new offense coordinator, new system, as we see teams make their way out to the field to do battle with West. But in Jack Nyros, who will probably be spot coming up behind us, was in an injured running back room as well, a young system there as well. Think about these two young guys, Quentin Scott particularly with that finishing game, so as I mentioned. What are some of the things you've seen out of them, the other young men who the running back is?
Well, it's really outstanding, those two particular guys, if they have something to prove here. It's not just, hey, we're coming out, we're trying to just do whatever we can. It's, we lost last season, and we want to showcase that if we were a part of last season, we're going to do our very best here. As we can see, one of the guys we're talking about, Andrew Scott, right there, and he's got this capability to run and burst, and when he's got 6 inches of space, the dude is gone. And that's really one of the outstanding capabilities. And you think, oh, yeah, that's exactly what Laurier needs. Another outstanding speed talent. But that's exactly what he is. And I think he's going to showcase his capabilities right here as well. And Jack Nyros, he really has zero worries about putting his helmet down and getting into a guy to get those extra yards, do whatever he has to for this team. You're going to see exactly that in this game here as the boys get amped and ready to go in this one.
And of course, with Quentin Scott, the idea of him teaming up with Tayshaun Jackson when he goes back to Lightning and Lightning is tremendous. We'd be remiss to not talk about the full running back. We looked at some of those eight-back and fullbacks coming out of Team West, and specifically in Sandro Perini coming out of the Western Mustang program. You talked about getting to see Coach Greg Marshall talk about running power deep football. We obviously know that that's a program that pumps out O-line every year, pumps out running backs every year. But that power does not function unless you have an eight-back fullback that can kick out a defensive end and look through the rosters, look through those CFL teams. This is the team that pumps out at that eight-back position year in, year out. And obviously, Perini, no slouch.
Absolutely. When you think of a Western offensive line or you think of a Western run game, the fullback is just as important as any of the other offensive linemen there. And Perini is another outstanding in a long line a phenomenal fullback for the Western Mustangs. He's going to be another key component into this entire game here, and I think he's really going to showcase why Western's been so damn successful.
Yeah. And Tom, obviously, as Team West joins Team East on their respective sidelines, moments ways to pick up, no doubt, moments from the anthem. Final thoughts if you get that slightly about select battle.
I love this East-West meet so much I cannot get over it because it's just from top to bottom a celebration of football. That's exactly what you're going to see on the field right now, and that's exactly what this entire week has been. I think you're going to see some of the most exciting football that you've seen across the entirety, and if nothing else, for the people who are just craving for some new sports action, that's exactly what you and I are, and we are so excited to watch this game. I can't wait to see it.
If you aren't here right now at the University of Waterloo, we're hoping you're tuning in, listening to the dulcet tones of Adam McGuire, calling it up for what is such an outstanding game. We'll be breaking it down on a podcast along with all your other experiences in a short little while, but we have to get set to check out this game. So thank you so much, Tom. As always, a pleasure to our boys with Royal Media. Thank you, as always, to everyone at the University of Waterloo for putting on the best show that you can get for the East-West. So we're going to go enjoy this East-West action. We hope you're going to do the same, and we'll talk to you very soon right here after the